Long-lived assets. In this reading, we will talk about the acquisition of long-lived assets, how to depreciate and amortize long-lived assets, the revaluation model, how to impair assets, the concept of derecognition, and then we will briefly speak about presentation and disclosure requirements, and finally investment property. Long-lived assets are defined as those assets which are expected to provide future economic benefits extending more than 1 year. These assets may be tangible, intangible, or financial. The major questions we will address in this reading are as follows. What value should be shown on the balance sheet when we acquire the asset? And then what value should be shown on the balance sheet during the life of the asset? We will also be concerned about how the cost should be allocated over the life of the asset. Let's first talk about the acquisition of long-lived assets. Upon acquisition, long-term tangible assets such as property, plant, and equipment are recorded on the balance sheet at cost, which is typically the same as fair value. The asset's cost might include expenditures in addition to purchase price, and the question is whether these costs should be expensed or capitalized. On the next slide, we'll talk about which costs should be capitalized and which costs should be expensed. With intangible assets, the valuation depends on how the intangible asset is acquired, and we will discuss this later on. Property, plant, and equipment. At acquisition, property, plant, and equipment is recorded at cost. Cost includes all expenditures necessary to get the asset ready for intended use. It is important to understand this because there is a good chance that you might get a question related to what cost must be expensed versus what cost needs to be capitalized. Say you purchase a machine for 1,000. Clearly, this cost needs to be capitalized and shown on the balance sheet. In addition to 1,000, you pay 100 to install the machine and get it ready for intended use. That obviously will also be capitalized. Say you also pay 50 to get the factory ready for this machine. As an example, the floor needs to be reinforced in order to support this heavy equipment, and that costs 50. This 50 is also going to be capitalized. If you do a routine maintenance or you have your factory painted, then those expenses are expensed. That means they flow through the income statement, they are not shown on the balance sheet. If you train your staff to use this machine, that also needs to be shown as an expense which flows through the income statement. If there are any subsequent costs related to the equipment that you purchased and set up, those costs are capitalized if they are expected to provide benefit beyond 1 year. So if you make a major upgrade to the equipment and that upgrade is expected to provide a benefit for 3 years, then that upgrade cost can be capitalized. Otherwise, if you incur a cost where the expected benefit is less than 1 year, then that cost has to be expensed. As you might have gathered, there will be some expenses or some costs where there is subjectivity as to whether the cost should be expensed or capitalized, and different companies might make different expensing versus capitalizing decisions. You as an analyst need to realize that the choice of whether to expense or capitalize has an impact on financial statements and hence on ratios. Let us take a quick look at the sort of impact that a capitalizing versus expensing decision might have on financial statements and ratios. Total assets. A firm that is more inclined to capitalize will tend to show higher assets relative to a firm that is expensing. Obviously, equity will also be higher for the firm is capitalizing because of the simple relationship which says that equity is assets minus liability. Liabilities are not impacted by the capitalizing versus expensing decision. Assets obviously are higher for the capitalizing firm, therefore equity is also going to be higher for the capitalizing firm. Income variability. This is important. Income variability is going to be lower for the capitalizing firm. The reason is quite straightforward. With a capitalizing firm, when we incur a cost of say 1,000 to purchase a machine, this cost is spread over the life of the machine, which means that the net income during the year where the machine is purchased is not going to be impacted by this entire 1,000 amount. If the machine is being used over 10 years, then the cost associated with the machine will be 1/10 of 1,000 every year. So it will be 100 in the first year, 100 in the second year. That essentially is depreciation, which we will discuss in detail later. But notice that this cost of 1,000 through the process of depreciation is spread over the life of the equipment, and therefore the income variability will be low. For a company that expenses, the entire 1,000 is shown when the machine is purchased, and that 1,000 expense obviously is going to cause the net income to go down. In the next year there will be no expense, so net income is going to go up. Therefore, for the expensing firm, the income variability will be relatively high. This can also be stated as follows: the cost variability is going to be low for the capitalizing firm and high for the expensing firm. Net income over the first year. This is when the machine is purchased. This number is going to be high for the capitalizing firm relative to the expensing firm. And the reason is quite straightforward. When we put that entire 1,000 as a expense, obviously net income is going to go down for the expensing firm. In later years, the net income is lower for capitalizing firm and higher for expensing firm, because in later years there will be a depreciation expense associated with the capitalizing firm, but there will be no depreciation expense for the expensing firm. Cash flow from operations, CFO, this is higher for the capitalizing firm, and this again is important to understand. When a capitalizing decision takes place, that means that we are showing a investment. So we are putting something on the balance sheet. We are saying that the cash flow is a investment cash flow, whereas when we expense, we are saying that our cost of 1,000, let's say we are talking about that same machine, if a company is expensing, then that cost of 1,000 is shown as a operating expense. So notice, for the capitalizing firm, the 1,000 goes into the operating bucket of the cash flow statement. Since the 1,000 is going into the operating bucket, therefore the cash flow from operations will appear higher for the capitalizing firm. For the firm that is expensing, the $1,000 spent is going to be shown in the operating bucket, which will cause CFO to come down. Therefore, for the expensing firm, the CFO is lower relative to the CFO for the capitalizing firm. Using the same logic, the CFI for the capitalizing firm is lower, because now this 1,000 is going to be shown as part of the CFI bucket, which will cause CFI to be lower relative to the CFI for the expensing firm. Debt to equity, this is fairly straightforward. We've already discussed that debt is not impacted by the capitalizing versus expensing decision. The equity is higher for the capitalizing firm, therefore the overall ratio is lower for the capitalizing firm relative to the expensing firm. Interest coverage ratio is EBIT divided by the interest expense. The interest expense is the same for both the capitalizing firm and the expensing firm, but the operating profit is going to be higher for the capitalizing firm. The reason is that the entire 1,000 expense is going to cause the EBIT for the expensing firm to go down a lot relative to the EBIT for the capitalizing firm. Therefore, in the first year, the interest coverage for the capitalizing firm is going to be higher relative to the interest coverage for the expensing firm. However, in subsequent years, the EBIT for the capitalizing firm is lower because of the depreciation expense. Therefore, the interest coverage ratio is going to be lower for the capitalizing firm relative to the expensing firm. With the expensing firm, we will not have any depreciation expense. Let us now look at an example which deals with what expenses are capitalized versus which expenses are expensed. Acme Inc. purchased a machine for $10,000. In addition, the following costs were incurred: $200 for delivery, $300 for installation, $100 to train the staff, $1,000 to reinforce the floor to support the machine, and $500 to have the factory painted. Which expenses will be capitalized and which will be expensed? Clearly, this expense of $10,000 is going to be capitalized. $200 for delivery, this is necessary to get the machine into a working form, so this needs to be capitalized. The installation cost also needs to be capitalized. $100 to train staff to use the machine. Just remember the fact that the training cost is not capitalized. This needs to be expensed. The way you can think of this is training of staff is a routine activity that companies should be doing. Plus, if the staff is trained and then they leave, then obviously that doesn't provide a long-term benefit to the company. So in general, training cost is expensed. $1,000 to reinforce the floor to support the machine. This needs to be capitalized because this cost has to be incurred for the machine to operate, and this cost, while not explicitly stated here, is likely to provide a benefit over a period longer than 1 year. $500 to have the factory painted. This clearly is going to be expensed. So you simply add up these numbers: 10,000 plus 500 plus 1,000, and that will give you the amount that needs to be capitalized. 100 plus 500 is what needs to be expensed. How will the treatment of these expenditures affect the company's financial statements? We need to look at the balance sheet here, the income statement, and the cash flow statement. On the balance sheet, the property, plant, and equipment will go up by 11,500, which is simply the sum of all the capitalized expenses. And obviously, if we are paying using cash, then cash goes down by the same amount. On the income statement, we will show the expenses: 100 to train the staff, and then 500 to have the factory painted. So these go to the income statement. We will also show a depreciation expense over the life of the asset on the income statement. As far as the cash flow statement is concerned, this cost of 11,500 is going to be shown as part of CFI, whereas the expenses that are expensed, 100 and 500, these are going to be shown as part of cash flow from operations. Capitalizing of interest costs. For constructed assets, interest costs during construction are capitalized as part of the asset cost. The idea is straightforward. Let's say that you are constructing a building and the construction period is 2 years. To create this building, let's say you borrowed some money and you are paying interest on that money. The interest cost can be thought of as just another cost. The way material is a cost, labor is a cost, the same way interest is a cost. And since material and labor are being capitalized, it makes sense to also capitalize the interest cost associated with creating this building. But the interest cost will be capitalized during the construction period. The question then becomes what interest rate to use. The answer is use the rate on borrowing related to construction. So if your construction costs 100 million and you have borrowed 100 million specifically for this construction at a rate of 10%, then you use the 10% rate. So your capitalized amount will be based on 10%. If no construction debt is outstanding, the interest rate is based on existing unrelated debt. It is also possible that a company has issued a bond and raised 200 million through that issue. The 200 million that is raised is used to pay for the building, plus it is used to pay for other expenditures. Given that in this example we don't have a borrowing that is specific to construction, we can then use the rate that is relevant for this bond issue. Let's say that rate is 12%. We can then use the 12% number to calculate the capitalized interest. The capitalized interest is not reported as an expense on the income statement, and that's obvious. Since we are capitalizing, that means that the amount is going on the balance sheet, even though we are making interest payments. And that's important. You are borrowing money, and let's say you are borrowing money from a bank, you need to make payments to the bank, but the interest expense is not shown on the income statement initially. It is shown as a asset. But then as the asset is depreciated, then essentially the interest expense is shown as a depreciation expense over the life of the asset. Just as a subtle distinction between IFRS and US GAAP, IFRS says that the interest on short-term lending offsets capital costs. This is not allowed under US GAAP. This will become clear in the example that we will look at shortly, but just to give you a quick sense, let's say that you borrow 100 million at 10%, and that means that over the 2-year period, you are going to make payments of 10 million and 10 million. So your capitalized interest according to US GAAP is going to be 20 million. What IFRS says is that when you get this 100 million, you are obviously going to invest it in a operating bank account. And when you invest this money or place this money in the bank, you are going to get some interest. Let's say that the interest amount that you get is equal to 1 million. Then the 1 million offsets the 20 million that we are capitalizing. So the capitalized interest then becomes 20 million minus 1 million, which is 19 million. That is according to IFRS. US GAAP says that the entire 20 million needs to be capitalized. Let us look at a few conceptual issues related to capitalized interest. Capitalized interest causes higher net income and greater interest coverage ratios during the period of capitalization. Notice that when we capitalize interest, then it is not showing up on the income statement. As we've discussed up here, the interest expense is capitalized, so it causes the asset value to go up, which means that the expenses on the income statement are relatively low, which means that the net income is relatively high for the firm that is capitalizing interest. The interest coverage ratio is going to be high. The interest coverage ratio is essentially EBIT over the interest expense. If we are showing a relatively low interest expense, then EBIT over interest expense is going to be high. Notice that the lower or higher interest expense does not impact EBIT because EBIT is earnings before interest and taxes. So therefore, our interest coverage ratio is going to be high during the period of capitalization. But then what happens in subsequent periods? Higher asset values and depreciation lead to lower net income and lower EBIT and interest coverage. again, this should be fairly clear. In the year that we capitalize, or in the years of capitalization, let's say that back to our original example, it takes 2 years to construct our building. So in these years, we are capitalizing interest expenses. Because of that capitalization, our value of the asset, the building in this case, is relatively high because that value includes the capitalized interest. This means that in subsequent years, the depreciation amount is going to be high, which means that our expense is going to be relatively high because this will include the depreciation of the capitalized interest. Since the expense is relatively high, the net income is going to be relatively low. EBIT is going to be low because depreciation is considered a operating expense. If you look at your basic income statement, you subtract depreciation in order to come up with EBIT. So if depreciation is relatively high, that would mean that EBIT is relatively low, and your interest coverage ratio, which is EBIT divided by the interest expense, is also going to be relatively low because after construction you are going to actually show your interest expense as an expense on the income statement, and your EBIT is also lower because of the extra depreciation. Therefore, the overall interest coverage ratio is lower. Given what we just talked about, I want you to do this example. Here is what you should get. 2 million at 5% over a 2-year period means that the interest that is being paid over the 2-year construction period is 200,000. This needs to be capitalized according to US GAAP. So US GAAP says that the entire 200,000 is capitalized. What IFRS says is the following: you are paying this much interest based on your borrowing, but when you borrow money, you put the money in an operating account and you get interest worth 20,000. This 20,000 needs to be netted out from the 200,000, and that gives you 180,000. So according to IFRS, 180,000 is what is going to be capitalized. Where will the capitalized borrowing cost appear on the company's financial statements? Initially, the capitalized amount is going to appear on the balance sheet, and then after the construction is complete, then we will have this entire capitalized amount as part of the asset value. Once the asset is depreciated, then the capitalized interest is also expensed out through the depreciation process via the income statement over the life of the asset. Intangible assets. Intangible assets lack physical substance. Classic examples include software, customer lists, patents, copyrights, and trademarks. Accounting for an intangible asset depends on how it is acquired. Broadly speaking, there are 3 ways in which we can acquire an intangible asset. Number 1, acquired in a business combination. This simply means that you have a company A, which is the acquirer. This acquires a company T, which is the target company. Let's say that company T has some patents, and the fair value of these patents is 100. Once T is acquired and all assets of T come to the balance sheet of A, including the patent needs to be shown at fair value. And that's important because it is possible that the value of the patent on the books over here is equal to 0. Perhaps the patent was developed internally and there is no book value because all costs associated with the patent were expensed. So the book value would be 0. But if the fair value of the patent is 100, then when this patent is shown on the balance sheet of company A, it needs to be shown at fair value, which is 100. As you can imagine, the determination of this fair value requires judgment. An analyst needs to figure out whether this fair value is appropriate or not. The second scenario is as follows: purchased in situation other than business combination. This is a long-winded way of saying that a company simply purchased the intangible asset such as a patent. Here, obviously, the intangible asset will be recorded at fair value, which most probably is the amount that was paid for the intangible asset. Developed internally, this is where the intangible asset is developed internally by the company, and we will see this on the next slide. Intangible assets developed internally. Under IFRS, research costs are expensed as incurred and development costs are capitalized. This is important. The research phase means that a company is spending money on a given intangible asset but is not sure whether that intangible asset will actually have a long-term benefit for the company. Since it is not clear that the intangible asset will have a long-term benefit, therefore all cost incurred during the research phase needs to be expensed. Once it is clear that the intangible asset being created is going to have a future benefit, say we have created the prototype, we know it will work, and now we need to develop that into a proper product, then we are in the development phase, and the development costs according to IFRS can be capitalized. US GAAP is more strict. US GAAP says that both research and development costs are to be expensed as incurred. As an analyst, you need to be careful about this, because if you are comparing a US GAAP company with a IFRS company, then the IFRS company is likely to have a higher asset value because it is capitalizing the development cost, whereas the US GAAP company is likely to have lower asset values and higher expenses because this company is expensing development costs. Coming now to software. Software is an important subcategory under intangible assets, and with software there are two possible situations. One is the cost incurred to develop software for sale to others, and the other is software for internal use. Let's look at the sale to others scenario first. Here the cost incurred needs to be expensed until the product's technological feasibility has been established. Subsequent costs should be capitalized. So if you are a software company and you are creating a new software, until such time as you are clear that this product will be saleable, you are supposed to expense. Once the technological feasibility is established and you know you can sell this product, then you can capitalize. Now clearly there is a lot of subjectivity involved here. When can we say that a product is now technologically feasible? So that decision point can depend or can be different from company to company. You as an analyst need to be aware of that when you are evaluating different software companies. Under IFRS, costs incurred to develop software for internal use should be capitalized once feasibility is established. US GAAP says that we need to capitalize all development costs. Make sure you learn the material on this slide, because the next slide will be a question based on what you are looking at here. Okay, now try to do this. The first thing you need to recognize is that we are talking about an internal software development project. So from the previous slide, this is the third category. The project starts on 1st January 2012, so that's the start of the year. It incurs expenditures of 10,000 per month during the fiscal year ended 31st December 2012. So the cost is being incurred throughout the year. By March 31st, so at the end of month 3, it is clear that the product will be developed successfully and will be used as intended. So the cost incurred during this period is going to be expensed according to IFRS, and then from 3 to 12 this cost will be capitalized according to IFRS. The expense therefore would be 10,000 into 3, which is 30,000, and the amount capitalized would be 10,000 into 9, which would be 90,000. What US GAAP says is that the entire cost for the year needs to be capitalized. So we have 10,000 over a 12-month period, so 120,000 is capitalized. Coming now to depreciation and amortization of long-lived assets. Under the cost model of reporting long-lived assets, the capitalized cost of a tangible long-lived asset is expensed through a process called depreciation. The cost model is something that you probably know about already. When you buy an asset, you record it at the initial cost plus how much ever it takes to set the machine up. Let's say that amount is 1,000. Then if this machine is going to be used over 10 years and at the end of 10 years the salvage value or the value of the machine is 0, then what you do is, through a process called depreciation, you allocate the cost. Let's say in this case we are using simple straight line depreciation. Then we take this 1,000 and break it into 10 parts. So we depreciate 100 every year for 10 years, such that the value is 0 at the end of the 10-year period. Essentially what we've done is taken that cost of 1,000 and spread it over the useful life of the machine. When we do this for a tangible asset, the process is called depreciation. When we do this for an intangible asset, the process is called amortization. An asset's carrying amount or carrying value is the amount at which the asset is reported on the balance sheet. This is also called net book value. The book value when you purchase the asset, in this particular case, is 1,000. After 1 year, you have depreciated 100. So the carrying amount or carrying value is 900. After 2 years, the accumulated depreciation is now 200. So the net book value is equal to 800, and so on. That is expressed through this simple formula. Carrying amount is historical cost, which in this example is 1,000, minus accumulated depreciation. The historical cost is sometimes also called the gross value or the gross amount associated with the asset. There are several different depreciation methods. The three that you need to be aware of are straight line method, where the cost of the asset is allocated evenly over the useful life. That is what we have done over here. There are several accelerated methods which depreciate more in the early years and less in the later years. So for example, if I had depreciated 400 first and then 300, then 200, then the depreciation would be called accelerated depreciation. And finally, units of production method means that we depreciate based on how much is being produced. If this particular machine can produce 1,000 units and in the first year we produce 300 units, then we would depreciate 30% in the first year, because the usage of the machine in the first year has been 30% of overall usage. In order to understand the different depreciation methods, I want you to work through this example. Consider three companies. The first company uses straight line depreciation. The second uses double declining balance. This is a form of accelerated depreciation. And the third company depreciates based on units of production. For simplicity, we will say that all three companies are otherwise identical and they purchase the same equipment for 10,000 and they make similar assumptions. Estimated useful life is 4 years. That means they expect to use the machine over a 4-year period. Residual value is 1,000. which means that at the end of 4 years, they expect that the machine will be worth 1,000. Productive capacity is 1,000, and the production over 4 years is given over here. We need to complete the table below for each company. This final piece of data will come in useful for the UOP company. I'll give you a few hints in terms of how to solve this, and then the next slide gives you the solution. The beginning book value for all three companies is going to be 10,000. The depreciation expense for straight line is based on the following simple formula. You notice that from 10,000 to a salvage value of 1,000 means that the total amount that needs to be depreciated is 10,000 minus 1,000, which is 9,000. This 9,000 has to be depreciated equally every year. That is what you need to do for the straight line method. Double declining balance, as I mentioned, is one type of accelerated depreciation where you depreciate more initially. The double means that the depreciation rate is twice that of straight line. With straight line, we are depreciating over 4 years, so every year the depreciation is 25%. With double declining, we will use twice this number, so we will depreciate 50% every year. But 50% of what? This 50% is 50% of the book value or carrying value at the start of every period. Notice that at the start of period 1, the book value is going to be 10,000. So the depreciation for period 1 or year 1 is 50% of 10,000, which is 5,000. Once you do that depreciation, the value at the end of the year is going to be 5,000. And now you will depreciate based on 50% of 5,000. You keep depreciating until the salvage value is reached. So you reach a value of 1,000, which is the residual value, and then you don't depreciate anymore. In other words, the depreciation amount, the total depreciation amount over the 4-year periods should be the same for all three methods. The difference is the amount of depreciation in each period. For units of production, as I have mentioned before, you depreciate based on how many units are produced relative to the total number of units that are expected to be produced by this machine. In this particular case, we have 300 out of 1,000 units being produced in the first year. That would mean that your depreciation in the first year is 30%. You can use the same logic for subsequent years. Before going to the next slide, make sure that you complete this table for each company. So there should be a table for the straight line company, then another one for DDB, and a third one for UOP. Here is what you should get. It is fairly straightforward, so you can look at the numbers and compare them with what you got. Continuing with the same example, what we need to now understand is the fact that different depreciation methods will have an impact on financial statements and on several ratios. And to do that, I want you to compute the asset turnover ratio, the operating profit margin, which is essentially the operating profit or EBIT divided by sales, and the operating return on assets. The operating return on assets again is the operating profit or EBIT divided by the total asset amount. What you are going to notice is that since our depreciation amounts are different for the three different companies, and in this case actually we are only doing this for two companies, the straight line company and the accelerated depreciation company. So we are going to see how different assumptions related to depreciation are going to impact financial statement elements and ratios. Obviously, to compute margins and return on assets, we need to make certain assumptions. We'll make this simplistic assumption that the sales for both companies over the 4 years are given here. The operating expenses not including depreciation are the same. Carrying amount of total assets excluding the equipment that we are talking about here equals 30,000 for both companies over the 4-year period. This is extremely simplistic, but it is important to make these simple assumptions in order to understand the impact of the different depreciation methods. I want you to come up with a solution for both the straight line depreciation company and the DDB company, and then you can compare with what I have. I have created a Excel file and placed that on our discussion group, which you can access by clicking right here, and you can then compare what you got, and you can also discuss your answer with other CFA level 1 candidates.